So, welcome back. So, we're on day 5 already somehow. These things always start to fly at some point. So, today is point 5, which is apply insight and joy. So, today's teaching is about broadening and deepening our practice by assessing for ourselves how it's going and by lightening up, which I like. So, this is a way to stay engaged and informed about our path and to delight in our progress, which is motivating and honestly really important. So, we need to check in from time to time to see how it's going. We don't need to constantly monitor how we're doing, right? Which would be a total disaster. Otherwise, we overreact to every little slip back into our old habits and we drive ourselves crazy and we get discouraged. However, it should feel like you're making some improvement over a long period of time, or else your practice isn't working and you need to, tweak it in some way, or there's been a misunderstanding. Um, so we begin with slogan 19, which is all Dharma agrees at one point. So Dharma here refers to the teachings. So this means that all teachings boil down to one major lesson, which is to release ego clinging, which we will talk about. Or as Norman Fisher puts it, don't be so stuck on yourself. So Norman explains it this way. He says, whenever you feel upset, unhappy, dissatisfied, in a snit, frozen, constricted, bound, check and see. Probably if you reflect deeply enough, you'll come to the realization that the ultimate cause of this unpleasantness is that you're in one way or another stuck on yourself, favoring yourself and your own needs, desires, and viewpoint more than necessary. Even recognizing this and opening up just a little relieves the pressure. And I think it's important to acknowledge, especially with the background that some of us have come to, that we might turn judgment onto ourselves for a situation. That's also, from this point of view, ego clinging, like blaming yourself too hard and sort of being stuck in, I did this and I don't like that. That would also be seen as ego clinging, even though it's negative. So it isn't just favoring yourself in a positive light. It's also obsessing about yourself in a negative light. And it's just important to say that because we're, some of us tend one way and some of us tend the other. So my first teacher used to call this selfing. And I kind of liked having that verb to use. Oh, I'm selfing. And the truth is, we often get stuck in our narrow point of view, and it causes us to suffer. So what this doesn't mean is that we don't need to value our own point of view. So this isn't saying to only see things from the point of view of other people. We do need to value our own point of view. But there are other points of view out there and other people's feelings to take into consideration. So the teachings are designed to help us shift from just seeing from our point of view to a wider perspective that includes multiple points of view, including our own. And this is incredibly valuable in resolving conflict and honestly, having relationships. So another way to put this, and I just think it's really important because I thought for a long time, and I've heard other people sort of think that like releasing the ego in some way means like not having your own point of view and sort of only feeling like the world, but it doesn't work that way. And that wouldn't be helpful actually, because self-love needs to be an underlying thread through all of these teachings. So another way to say this is we can retain our self-respect without being self-centered. And this puts us more in contact with the actual reality of the world around us. And again, what this is not saying is that you have to somehow get rid of your ego. And I'm just going to make this point over and over because I hear it all the time in yoga circles and in Buddhist circles, actually, that we think something's wrong with our ego. And if we only got rid of that, we'd be fine. Well, good luck. First of all, hating your ego is not going to make it any quieter. Okay. And second of all, that's not what they're saying. Um, so, what we do want to do, though, is see where our egoic armoring is sabotaging our happiness. And we want to care about that instead of reinforcing it. See it, have some tenderness around it, and don't feed it. So, this attitude of tenderness defuses the habit and softens the armor. So, it's a much kinder way to go than somehow sort of thinking we're going to battle this ego thing into submission and kill it off and then be happy after all of that violence, aggression. So, we can also go further from this and consider being generous and positive to other people in general as a strategy for being happy. Anyway, so not just when things are tough, but all the time. So science has shown that altruism makes us happy and improves our overall well-being, in addition to having health benefits and possibly lengthening our lifespan. So consider doing little things or big things to make other people happy on a regular basis and see how that makes you feel. And I promise you, other people won't mind it either. And this isn't to say that you don't already do that, but it's interesting to do it consciously as a strategy for being happy. And of course, at first, and this is called enlightened self-interest in these teachings, where you kind of do it for yourself at first. And then, of course, at some point, you're just doing it for the general goodness of it overall. And again, this isn't to say that you're not already doing it, but it's interesting to do more consciously. Slogan 20. Of the two witnesses, hold the principal one. So this slogan is saying that in any situation, other people will have views of you and you'll have your own view of you. And the principal view is your own insight. So it's saying, hold the principal view, value your own insight about yourself. So everyone's giving feedback and opinions all the time, right? And we do want to listen to other people's feedback because there might be a kernel of truth in there. There might be something that we can't see about ourselves that's apparent to someone else. So this isn't saying ignore all other people. Norman Fisher says, don't be stubborn and ignore everybody else. Just like his voice sometimes. But we have to remember that a lot of other people's opinions is their projection of us, actually. So it's our responsibility alone to see our own life as clearly as possible and to act from there. And nobody can actually do that for us. So in other words, trust yourself. Only you know your experience, your history, your thoughts, things you've done that you haven't told anybody about, and how it feels to be you. And it's your own sense of your life that makes your life. So this is saying, don't be driven by the opinions of others. And also, don't always be looking to others for reassurance. We need to find our own internal guide on this path. However, we need to be sure that we find our compassionate inner guide. So self-criticism is corrosive and unhelpful. And we really need to avoid comparing ourselves to our ideas about where other people are. So the principal witness is the self that loves itself and therefore is trustworthy. And I just love this about all of the Buddhist and yogic teachings. It's not that there isn't a teacher and teachings and guidance from others and spiritual friendship, but like ultimately, it's up to us to do this ourselves, to assess it ourselves, um, and to keep that sort of responsibility and that internal integrity rather than giving over our power to someone else and then getting disappointed when that doesn't work out, because eventually it won't work out. Slogan 21 is always maintain only a joyful mind. So this is a slogan about broadening and deepening our practice, so let's not take it the wrong way. If you feel depressed or bitter or something, please don't deny it or try to cover it up because we're trying to maintain a joyful mind. That wouldn't be helpful. We don't want to be phony, and we really don't want to judge ourselves when we're not joyful. However, this teaching is to point us in that kind of general direction of joy. So Lojong is designed to help us become joyful when we're in a bad mood, and to try to keep a sense of humor when things are going badly. So for myself, when things get heavy, I try to remember I'm practicing Lojong. I'm trying to turn my difficulties into the path. So sometimes I can get a chuckle out of myself that the world has given me something real to actually work with in this practice. I'm not saying I actually appreciate the bad thing in the moment, but to see it as useful lightens the situation. So here's my example for you. In the retreat where I learned Lojong, I had herniated a disc 2 days before I started the retreat. I was staying in a cabin off the grid. I had to squat constantly to tend the wood stove or to go to the bathroom outside, but I couldn't really squat, and I literally couldn't get up once I was squatting. And I had to do it all the time, all the time. Plus, I'm on a meditation retreat, but I can only sit for about 15 minutes before my back said, no, you have to get up and move, which meant, of course, getting up, right, which was a problem. And then on top of that, I had a propane leak. So, and that didn't get fixed till day 11. So I wasn't sure if I was going to die in my sleep or explode the cabin. Like, seriously, I just kept saying to myself, could I have better material to practice Lojong, right? Like to see how I was making these things worse, like blaming around around the propane not getting fixed. And there was no blaming around the back. It was just fear. But I mean, it was just an incredible amount of material. I also had like water freeze and a bunch of other things go on. But it was actually fantastic when I could stop. And then that would just make me literally laugh out loud. Like, you wanted Lojong, you got Lojong. And I just think that that can be helpful. So slogan 21 relies on the understanding that when we can't change difficult circumstances, it all comes down to how we relate to what's happening. It's a reminder to work with what's happening instead of just struggling, or instead of struggling at all. And of course, when we can change something, we should, right? So I did turn off the propane when I didn't need it. And I was in contact with the repair folks, right? I didn't just say, oh, this is so great to practice with, I'm not going to do anything about it. Like, that's crazy. And we can just, sometimes we do. I have done that in relationship. I have let things sort of that weren't right go on because I thought I was working with them, and like somehow this was my lesson, when the lesson was to have a boundary. So it's important. This isn't saying don't fix things that you can fix. But we all know that there are things we can't change or that take time to change, actually. So if we can investigate what we're doing internally or externally to increase the suffering, then we can orient ourselves towards adjusting these habits and improving the situation. And it's exciting, really, that there are practices to apply when things get difficult. I find that exciting. As Trungpa Rinpoche says, someone has to start to sow seeds of harmony and sanity in this world, and we're doing it. So we're touching into, believing in, and getting to know our own basic goodness, and this is definitely something to celebrate. And then how about when not that much is happening? We can keep our mind more joyful by appreciating little things, appreciating the ordinary, and appreciating the lack of drama when we're not experiencing difficulty. I think this is really important. We're so trained to like want everything to be exciting and, rather than actually wanting, we all say we want some peace, but when we have it, how do we feel about it? Are we bored? It's important to turn that around and say, wow, I don't have any problems, particularly today. That's awesome, and yeah. So we want to practice being grateful for our lives, being grateful for being on this path to improve our lives for the sake of ourselves and the sake of other people. And this brings us to our last point for today, point 22. If you can practice even when distracted, you are well trained. So this is pointing to the fact that when you find yourself caught up and spinning out about something, you can use that moment to bring yourself back to the present moment. There's a Zen saying, when you fall on the ground, you use the ground to get up. So I think this takes some practice and training to bounce back into presence from being lost in resistance or worry. But the good news is that with training, this can be your new habit. So once in a while, when I'm spinning out, I'll think like, what's going on? And then it might take me a bit, but eventually I'll realize like, oh, I'm not practicing. I'm not working with this. That's why I'm spending all of my time only freaking out. I'm not saying if I'm not working with it, I'll still freak out part of the time, but it's not only that happening, right? And that's a huge relief, kind of popping back into reality. So it's not that it fixes things, but it reorients my perspective to look to be constructive in some way, even in a small way, with what's happening. So we need to acknowledge that distraction, laziness, indulging in anger and jealousy are part of life. But we can use them as the foundation for our practice. So don't worry that these happen to you and don't judge yourself for having them. But if we can train to know when they're happening, that's the first step to using them to becoming more skillful in life. So it's important that we approach mind training in a gentle, permissive, and easygoing way, or else it's just going to be a nightmare. As Norman Fisher says, aggressive discipline usually inspires rebellion. And this makes me think of people, crash diets, New Year's resolutions, like going out hard and strong, and then you're just over it in like a matter of days, like hours. So it's not that we need to take time off practice per se, sometimes, but we just need to do it in a sustainable and relaxed way. And in fact, once you get the hang of practice, why would you take a break from making your life smoother and more harmonious? One more quote from Norman. He says, practice is just one long break from the tension and anxiety that we used to take for granted as the essential flavor of our lives. And I just think it's important to acknowledge like everyone finds himself on a continuum of sort of tension and anxiety. And even the folks who don't come to practice with like a ton of tension and anxiety, it doesn't mean it's not there. And the more you practice, you start to see like underlying patterns. It's like, I thought I was happy. I wasn't, and that's just real. So even for those people who are genuinely going through life, mostly satisfied, there's so much benefit to be done from these practices. So today we're going to meditate with what's called neutral people, which is a great way to broaden and deepen our practice. This is one of my favorite categories, actually, the neutral people. So these are folks we don't feel strongly for or against, which is basically most people in the world. So it's a way to generalize out to the people we might usually ignore or discount and start to generate our habit of compassion toward more and more beings. Before we practice, any thoughts or comments on any of that?
Um, I really like this bit of clarity on the, maintaining a joyful mind, but it doesn't mean numbing out to things. And although I know that, like, work with these difficulties to make them to make them part of my story, it just feels so like important to highlight, okay, joyful doesn't mean happy. It just means finding that good in every single like little seed that you're given. And I really like that. And to work with what's happening instead of struggling with it, I think that that's a great slogan for me, to be joyful. Because sometimes I'm like, okay, this is really hard, and I'll struggle through it. But really thinking more like, no, I'm just working with it. Like, isn't it cool? It's one of the cards I have in my hand right now. So just play it well, as opposed to being paralyzed because I have the Joker in my hand.
Beautiful. I love that statement that it doesn't necessarily mean being happy. That's
Yeah,
so perfect.
like, oh,
Beautiful.
right.
That was great, Holly. Thank you. Um, so many things. So good, so rich, all of these. And I like how you went over them, because it's easy to think, just like Holly was saying, that joyful mind, that it's like, put on your smiley face and act like everything's good when it's not. That's not real. That's not authentic. That's not that's not it, right? That's just pretend. So I love that clarification. And then the two witnesses, hold the principal one. Woo. Wow. Yeah, there's some confusion for me on that on a daily basis. So it's kind of nice to really just be like, right, trust yourself. What is mine, but still be open. Be open, but then kind of go within and go, what resonates? So that's just such a beautiful, simple way to remember. I love that. The, you know, if you can practice when distracted, you are well trained. Um, I love that. And I do think it takes training. I find myself able to do it more and more, and then still at times, like hooked in the blame and the this and the that. And then usually at some point, there's a moment where it's like, all right, let's look and see what's really happening underneath this, and why am I so bugged out, and just learning to relate to it differently, hold it more gently. Again, for me, it's a lot, super helpful to have sangha, to have community of people that will help me go there gently and make light, have a joyful way. I don't mean make light of it in a negative way, but not really, you know get on me. Like, they can hold that space, and that's super helpful. I also love that there's so much to learn, even if people, our lives are going really well, or if you feel like there's just like total happiness happening for you to go there. Because I think people sometimes will, they'll ask me like, well, I don't really have, isn't that for people who are really suffering, or it's really bad or whatever? And it's like, no, there's so much to gain from it. Even if things are really going well, there's always another layer to see, or more generosity, or more love, or more openness. Yeah. So I like that you stated that. I love Norman Fisher. Wow. So Thank you.
You know, Norman Fisher was the first teacher I listened to he taught a retreat at Upaya a number of years ago. And he said yes to everyone. People would ask a question and he managed to say yes before going on to explain. And I've never heard a teacher do that, like actually validate people, because you know that our background wasn't from there, from our first teacher. And I was like, oh, this doesn't have to be scary to ask a question. It really, and he's got wonderful. And so he wrote a book on the 7 points of mind training from a Zen point of view, and it's the very relaxed. So Trungpa Rinpoche and Pema Chodron and some of the older, those are all like Tibetan point of view because it's a Tibetan teaching. So I like to sprinkle his stuff through because his stuff was just, very practical to life. Sometimes it got so practical, I was like, I think we lost the point. And it got too vague. So I, went back and forth between, but they're all wonderful resources if you want to dive more into this stuff. Oh, and one more thing to what Andrew's saying about, and what I was saying about people, who everything seems to be going fine, why practice? We're all aging and we will all die eventually, and or have people in our lives die. So like, even if everything's not so hard now, gaining these skills for if they might, I think is, a wise thing to do. Holly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I wasn't going to say this, but I have a teacher in New York named Naveen Mishan, and she talks, and she's 70 years old and just like can slip into any pose that and she's like, you don't practice yoga to be able to do these poses. You practice yoga for when you can't do these poses so you don't go insane. Like, so what you're saying, like when you lose the ability to move about the world in the way you're accustomed, how do you deal with that?
Yeah,
And
about when we lose our minds.
yeah. And she talks about that.
Hopefully we get old enough for that.
Yeah. Yeah. But what I was going to say is that the slogan, all these slogans are so great, but slogan 20 also really touched me because value, like that of the two witnesses, like you were talking about, Angela. I think that it's taken me, I have great intuition, and it's taken me until I'm 48 years old to be like, oh, my body, my stomach is upset because I'm ignoring signs. I'm ignoring the things that are being given to me. And like, so of the two witnesses, hold the principal one, I tend to make other people's opinion like a godlike opinion at times, which is insane. So I just that I've really like gotten so much better at that, like trusting my body's communication and my gut's communication, but don't be driven by the opinions and reassurance. That's another one, like almost like asking or like wanting that reassurance or compliment from others. What I don't need that. What? So I really appreciate that one too. And that piece about self like criticism or comparing, you just have to avoid that, like straight up. And that's super. Yes, I could go down and be like, check, I know that, check, yes, check. But to put it all together like that is so valuable for me.
Awesome. All right, so let's do a little practice. Compassion Lojong for neutral, so-called neutral people. So let's allow the mind to drop down into the body. And maybe you go through some sort of routine that works for you to check in whether you're sitting tall in a relaxed way, whether the various places that you might hold tension, whether it's from tension or just from paying attention, like concentrating, softening those places. Maybe you don't have a routine or habit and you just kind of look around and see what's there. Getting to know the body as it is right now. And as a kind of safe place for the mind to be. And I think as we practice more and more through our lives, the body can be a safe place for the mind, even when the body's uncomfortable. And that's sort of fascinating. So grounding ourselves here in the body, however the body feels. Learning to practice from being in the body, learning to live being in the body. Allowing the breathing to settle into a natural rhythm. Relaxing the belly, releasing any tendency toward controlling the breath. It's so natural to want to start directing something we're paying attention to, and such fantastic practice to actually stop that habit for now and allow something we're paying attention to just be as it is. And now I'd like you to consider all that you're grateful for. Allow the feeling of gratitude to build up a feeling of joy in the center of your chest. Of course, if it fills your body, that's fine too, but just as a general guideline. And I'd like you to tune into this feeling as you grow it in the body. And now, with your natural exhale, share this joy out into the world. Exhale to the world your happiness, your appreciation, radiating this out into the world, hoping that other folks too feel this kind of joy, this kind of happiness. Consider all of the people around the world who you don't feel particularly strongly about. Folks who have neither particularly helped you nor particularly harmed you. Exhale your joy, your appreciation out to these folks. These are the folks we might not usually consider. Folks we might be indifferent to or even ignore. We may discount their importance not so much consciously, but just as a matter of habit. Tune into these people. Send them your well wishes. Offer them your warmth, your attention, your care. Now, consider what sorts of difficulty these folks may be facing. You may not know them all that well, but you can imagine the range of problems that someone might have, the types of challenging emotions that they may be facing. Inhale their difficulty, their pain. Exhale your best wishes for ease, for space around their problems. Inhale their discomfort. Exhale what it is that they might need right now, what might help them in their situation. Try not to shut down. If you find your mind wandering off to other topics, just relax and return gently. Don't force anything or try too hard. And there's no need to pretend. Simply be with whatever feelings you're currently able to generate. Let your ability to feel and express compassion to people grow naturally and in its own time. Now let's release the practice and return to the simplicity of observing the breath in the body. Any comments or thoughts on the practice, or of course anything else?
That was really lovely. So I didn't really stick to a being. It was more beings. And then it turned into critters too. Lots of like, I thought, I'm pretty neutral to like worms and stuff that's in the soil and underground. And I don't know, like all of a sudden they came to mind and I heard the UPS truck come. And so I was like, yeah, I don't think about the people that drive trucks that give us all of our stuff. Um, and just thinking about them and their lives and what they've gone through this year. And like I wasn't thinking of those things while I was sitting, but just like that came in and then in waves. It was easier for me to tap into than our practice yesterday of just being more open, I should say. Yesterday's was good for what I got to experience, not better or worse, just different. So, yeah, it was really beautiful. At the end, when we went back to our breath, I had something interesting happen again, like from here up was very tight. As I was having the doing the practice before we just sat, I was feeling so much love that it was like I wanted to almost start crying and tearing up. There was so much coming through. And so I think maybe I didn't let it all come through in a way, was sort of what it felt like at first. But then I also, I had COVID and the lung things are still, there's still stuff is what it kind of felt like. So at the end, instead of sitting, I kind of went broad, but then I just sent some extra love right here and did some of that, sort of went rogue in my practice there, because it felt like the correct thing at that moment to do. But I really liked the little critters and just how it opened up so many things and so many areas, of people. I started thinking a lot about Asia, where I grew up, and sending lots of love there. And I didn't even, it just sort of naturally happens, right? Where it's like, oh, yeah, that. And then, oh, yeah, this. And it was just very beautiful. So thank you.
I love thinking about the critters. There's a lot of sweetness there. Um, my mind always wanders in different practices. It goes different ways. So like your voice brings it back to from that like almost like I want to call it a monkey brain, where it's just like like keeps going, And when your voice brings it back, I was really, it was notable. I don't want to say I was surprised, but it was notable today how easy it was to give that compassion and love to people that I'm neutral to. And it made me think, wow, I really am full of that love and compassion. And it really is infinite. There's not like a finite amount. Oh, I gave it away. That's it. When I think about the people that I'm neutral. And perhaps the reason like the reason it feels finite with the people that I'm difficult that are difficult for me and vice versa is that it's costing me something. So it does feel like there's a finite amount of that love and compassion to give. And so in this practice, I really could feel like, oh my God, there's so much there. It's a well, it's a spring, it's never ending. And that was notable, remarkable to feel the difference from just yesterday or the day before. So I loved that.
That's so beautiful. Just this, yeah, because it's true. Relationships have challenges. Like every single relationship has challenges and sadnesses and little, griefs. And to acknowledge that, you know, that the basis is still love, and that we can find it, that that's a felt sense. It's not intellectual. It's not like a thought of that, but to feel it. Is so gorgeous. And I loved what Ange said too about like, sometimes it feels like so much. It's like, did I feel it all? I don't know, you know? Or is it post-COVID symptoms? Who knows? But like, you know, to let it flow too, to not sort of worry about it or worry that it's going to be too much, to remember like it's natural, you know, it's what we're made of, in my opinion. So gorgeous. All right, I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes. The first one is Pema Chodron. She says, someone once said that ego clinging is like sitting on the edge of the Grand Canyon and having all of your attention on a small pimple on your chin. Oh, pretty much. And then from Charlotte Joko Beck, she says, your failure to know joy is a direct reflection of your inability to forgive. You know, and that's, yeah, I will say that again. Your failure to know joy is a direct reflection of your inability to forgive. And of course, probably goes without saying, that doesn't just mean other people, you know. Thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow.